Story 1. The Girl in the Rest Stop Mirror. This happened to me in 2019. I was hauling across northern Utah, heading eastbound toward Colorado. It was early November, dry as hell outside, with a cold snap that made my windshield ice up even during the daytime. I'd stopped at a rest area off I-80, somewhere between Echo and Fort Bridger. One of those older rest stops. Concrete walls, steel stall doors, buzzing fluorescent lights. It was maybe 2:40 a.m. There was only one other rig in the lot, parked toward the far side, cab dark. The place felt empty. The only sounds were the low hum of the restroom ventilation and the echo of my boots on the tile floor. I went into the men's room first. It had that sharp, ammonia smell, a little too clean to be comforting. After I washed my hands, I noticed something odd. The mirror was fogged. It made no sense. It was freezing inside the building. That kind of dry, tiled cold that settles into your fingertips. I even tried breathing directly onto the glass. Nothing, no new condensation. But the whole top half of the mirror remained misted over, like someone had taken a hot shower just minutes ago, which wasn't possible. I stood there for a while watching the mirror, then I rubbed a circle into it with my sleeve just out of curiosity. And that's when I saw it. There was someone behind me, a silhouette. But when I turned around, no one. I was alone. The stall doors were still open, no feet visible. I looked back at the mirror, and the figure was gone. I chalked it up to being tired. Maybe the mirror had grime that caught the light weird, or maybe the shape was just the angle of my own jacket. But every time I looked away, even for a second, that shape would reappear in the edge of my vision, reflected faintly. Never directly in the glass, only in the blur. A kind of standing outline, like someone tall with long hair. Just enough to feel real, just enough that my body stiffened without my brain being sure why. I dried my hands and backed out of the room slowly. The hair on my neck felt like it was being pulled. Outside, the temperature hit harder. I exhaled again, just to see the vapor. It rose like normal, but something about my reflection inside didn't match. I kept glancing at the building's glass window as I walked away, expecting to see movement behind me. Instead, I saw the fog, still there. I didn't feel safe in my truck that night, which never happens. I locked the sleeper from the inside, crawled into my bunk and turned on a podcast, something dumb and loud. But halfway through, I got the urge to look in the side mirror. Just one of those things. You don't want to, but you do it anyway. The passenger side mirror was fogged, just the mirror. Nothing else on the truck. I didn't sleep until sunrise. Later that morning, after a few hours of shaky sleep, I climbed out of the cab and walked toward the vending machines. There was a corkboard taped to the wall, covered in faded flyers. Most were highway safety posters, a couple job listings, and one old paper curled at the edges. It was stained, maybe coffee, maybe rain, and partially torn. I only noticed it because of her face. The same face I'd half seen in the mirror. It was a missing persons flyer. Her name was Marissa Tenner, 24 years old. Last seen at that exact rest stop, November 2014. The photo on the flyer was what froze me. She was standing in front of a mirror, same kind of mirror as in the men's room. Maybe it was the women's side. The photo was cropped tight, but it looked like it could have been taken in that same building. The date hit me harder. 5 years earlier, almost to the day. I stood there reading the details. Last seen wearing a green jacket, traveling alone, car found abandoned. And the strangest thing was that I didn't remember seeing that flyer the night before. I would have noticed it. I stepped back and looked around. Nobody else was there, no signs of movement. I checked the truck next to mine. Still dark, still cold. The familiarity of her face gnawed at me. Not recognition exactly. Something worse, like déjà vu bent out of shape. It felt like my brain had registered it long before I'd actually seen it. And then I noticed something else. The bottom of the flyer had been retaped. Newer, clean strips of duct tape covered older, frayed ones. Someone had reattached it recently, but the flyer was still weather-worn, as if it had been sitting out for years. I went back to my rig and sat there with the engine idling, staring at the rest stop in the mirror. The fog on the glass was gone. But I swear I saw a smudge, the kind you'd get if someone pressed their forehead to the glass, just for a second. Weeks later, I was fueling up at a truck stop near Cheyenne and ran into another driver I'd chatted with a few times online. We sat in the diner for a bit, swapping road stories. The usual talk. I mentioned that stretch near Fort Bridger, the rest stop. He put down his coffee, mid-sip. "You ever see the mirror fog?" he asked. I froze. He went on to describe it exactly. Men's room, early morning, fogged mirror in a freezing room, breathing into the glass with no effect. Then the silhouette, always slightly turned, always gone when you looked directly. He told me he'd stopped there once, back in 2016. Woke up to find the inside of his sleeper cab window fogged, but only from the outside, with a single handprint on the glass. Said he didn't sleep the rest of that trip, still avoids that rest stop entirely. But then he added something else. He said there's this theory some drivers talk about, not ghosts, not hauntings, but what they call echo presence, like a behavioral residue, trauma looping. Not spirits exactly, but places worn thin by someone's absence. According to him, there have been at least 3 other reports of sightings at that rest stop. All different drivers, different years. Same description. He said the last one, a guy out of Oregon, actually reported the girl standing outside his sleeper. Not knocking, not moving, just standing there. The driver called dispatch in a panic, then drove off without even putting on shoes. He ended up in Kansas 3 days later, 600 miles off route, convinced she was still inside the cab. Swore he saw her reflection in the microwave door, heard her breathing at night, took weeks off after that. Nobody's sure what happened to Marissa Tenner. The case is still technically open. No new leads, no footage, no explanation. But every time I see a fogged mirror in a public restroom now, I hesitate before looking into it. Because I've learned something out here. Something I didn't believe until it happened to me. Some people never really disappear. They just stop being where you expect them to be. Story 2. The Man with No Taillights. This happened to me in 2018. I was running a long haul from Kansas City to Billings, Montana. Mid-November. The route was mostly clean highways, but the weather was dicey that week. Dry during the day, but the moment the sun dipped, everything slicked over. Black ice, invisible frost, dense fog in low elevations. I'd driven this route plenty of times. It's not a bad stretch, mostly flat, few curves, long open passes through farmland. The kind of roads you can set the cruise on and let your body fall into rhythm. That night was no different. I was coming up on the Nebraska line, just past midnight, road empty except for a few scattered rigs. Then I saw the car. It came into view up ahead, maybe half a mile out. No brake lights, no tail lights, just a dark shape hovering against the horizon, like it was soaking up the light from my high beams without reflecting anything back. I eased off the gas, didn't want to get too close too fast. The weird part was how steady it moved. Most vehicles at night, especially passenger cars, have this jitter to them. You'll see the slight sway from a drowsy driver, the uneven acceleration, overcorrections, brake flashes. This one, it didn't move like that. It held a perfectly centered line, no deviation. Its speed never fluctuated, not by even 1 mile. It didn't weave or adjust or react to my lights in its mirrors. It was like it wasn't really part of the road. I stayed behind it for a while, trying to make out details. I thought maybe it was a decommissioned highway patrol car or some kind of utility vehicle, but I couldn't identify a make or model. Its silhouette was wrong, sloped in the back, but too long in the body. No plate, no bumper stickers, no license frame. At one point I reached to flip on my fog beams just to get a better look, and in that second my headlights flickered. Not the truck's power, just the beam, a pulse. And in that flicker, I thought I saw movement inside the car, like a person in the back seat sitting up, But when the light came back, there was nothing, just that blank shape ahead, still holding its speed, its position, its eerie silence. That's what finally got to me. There was no noise, no engine hum, no tire hiss, no airflow. Normally, when you're behind another vehicle, even with your own cab noise, you can hear the turbulence, especially in cold air, that whirring suction that comes off their tail end. But this one, it didn't disturb anything. It just moved forward like it was part of the road itself. I checked the outside temp, 29 degrees and dropping. Road was beginning to gloss. I considered pulling off to grab a coffee and shake the feeling. But something in me didn't want to lose sight of that vehicle. It was like part of me was waiting for it to make a mistake, swerve, slow down, reveal it was real, something I could file away. But it never did. We drove like that for over an hour. It never turned, never signaled, never deviated by even an inch. I started to notice something else, a pressure in my chest that built the longer I stared at it. Not fear exactly, but a kind of tension I didn't know how to release. At 2:07 a.m., it took the same exit I was planning to, a trucker-friendly rest loop with a way station and fuel plaza. Only by the time I crested the ramp, it was gone. No lights, no movement, just empty road ahead. And in the side mirror, I saw it again, the shape, not in front of me, but passing behind. No sound, no flash of tires, just a dark motion slicing the corner of my vision. Then nothing. I didn't think about it much the next day, filed it under fatigue, maybe even early frost hallucination. But the following week, on a return run through roughly the same stretch, I experienced something I still can't explain. I just crossed into Iowa. The air was colder than usual, road clean, but slick in spots. I had the CB on. Not many drivers were talking, just the occasional chatter from eastbound lanes. Then it happened. The car was back. Same silhouette, same speed, same absence of light or sound. It merged in front of me from an on-ramp without headlights. No brake check, no hesitation. It just glided into my lane like it knew exactly when I'd be there. My heart went tight. I reached for the CB to let someone know, maybe get a plate read, anything. But the moment I keyed the mic, I heard nothing. Not static, just nothing. Like the signal had been swallowed whole. The screen showed full power, but no transmission, no return. It was like my voice didn't exist. I flipped through other channels, same thing. I checked my headset, unplugged and replugged it. Nothing. Then I noticed something even stranger. When I switched off the CB entirely and flicked the radio to a regular AM band, it played fine, until I passed directly behind that car. Then silence. Not static, not fuzz, just blank. As soon as I changed lanes to pull ahead, the signal came back. But for a split second, the audio was wrong. It wasn't the station. It was a voice, a child's voice, whispering. I don't remember all the words, just one phrase, behind you. My spine locked up. I glanced in the mirror, nothing but road. I switched back to the CB, and it worked. Channels came back. I could hear chatter again, but every time I tucked in behind that vehicle, silence. Pure, sterile, unnatural silence. I started to wonder if the car was emitting some kind of jamming signal. Maybe it was experimental, military, whatever, but that didn't explain the voice. That didn't explain the cold that began to seep through the cab every time I got too close. The rest of that trip, I kept changing lanes, passing, falling back, trying to see if it was just my imagination. But the pattern never broke. When I followed, my radio died. When I pulled ahead, the whisper. Always the same phrase, sometimes fainter, sometimes drawn out like a breath held too long. Behind you. I started logging the incidents. 6 different nights over the course of 2 months, always on Midwest routes. The vehicle showed up each time. Same body shape, same movement, same lightless glide. I had a buddy I trusted in dispatch, and I asked him if he could check the logs to see if any other drivers had reported odd vehicles or radio failures on those stretches. At first, nothing. Then he called me back late one night and told me something strange. Couple reports, he said. Not recent, but similar. Drivers seeing cars with no visible plates. Floating speed. Some even claimed the cars didn't leave tracks on wet pavement. I asked for details. He sent me a link to a private trucker forum post, buried deep in the archives. The title was Phantom Tail, Don't Follow It, dated 2015. One of the posts mentioned something called driverless convoy illusions, a term used for the kind of misidentification that can happen under fatigue, where tired brains start to project expected shapes onto visual input. Kind of like how you see patterns in static if you stare long enough, but that didn't track because I had dashcam footage, and when I pulled the recordings from the last 3 sightings, it wasn't there. The road ahead was empty, every single time. But here's the thing, when I froze the frame there was something, not in the direct view, but in the reflection on the wet asphalt, a shape, exactly where the car should have been. It shimmered like oil, a warped, glossy shadow, moving in sync with my headlights. It didn't have mass, it didn't throw light or block it, but the dashcam lens still captured its shape, bending across the pavement, like it was only visible in reflection. I brought the clip to a mechanic I know, someone who installs and debugs camera rigs. He couldn't explain it, said it looked like the cam was picking up a duplicate frame, an optical ghost caused by overlapping wavelengths. But then he pointed something out. The reflection didn't match any part of my truck, and it wasn't upside down, like a true mirror image should be. It was upright, moving ahead of me, exactly where the car was. He asked me what I thought it was. I didn't have an answer. That was the last time I saw it. But now, every time I drive long nights on quiet roads, especially when the pavement's wet and the mirrors blur, I look twice at what's ahead of me and even harder at what's not. Did you enjoy the content and it made a difference for you? Click on Super Thanks and support our work. Story 3. The sleep log that didn't match his memory. This happened in 2022. I was running solo, westbound from Missouri to eastern Oregon, a long stretch with nothing interesting to report until Nebraska. I had pulled a double the day before and was stretching my logbook a little. Nothing illegal, just messy sleep. The kind that leaves your thoughts soft around the edges. At the time, I was using an aftermarket GPS tracker that automatically logged engine activity, speed, and rest stops. I didn't pay much attention to it beyond what dispatch needed. But that morning, something wasn't right. I'd woken up off schedule, somewhere west of North Platte. My cab clock said 6:47 a.m., but my body felt like it was still 2 a.m. No alarms had gone off. The sleeper was cold, colder than it should have been for late spring. I'd pulled over just past a minor highway junction, one of those long shoulders off a ranch road with no lighting. Nothing about it looked familiar. I stretched, opened the logbook tablet, and checked the route to see if I'd overslept or driven too far. That's when I saw it. The tracker had registered a stop, engine off, full ignition cut, for exactly 47 minutes. From 3:41 a.m. to 4:28 a.m., the location pin dropped me in the middle of a blank patch of land. No rest stop, no signage, no shoulder, just a flat field. I zoomed in. There wasn't even a visible access road, let alone a safe turnout. According to the map, I hadn't pulled off. I just stopped, middle of a dead zone, 4 hours from the last station I remembered. I scrolled back to the last marker before that one. The GPS showed I'd been going 56 MAF, then a sharp drop. Braking recorded, full stop, engine cut. Then nothing. Then 47 minutes later, the engine restarted, and I continued westbound like nothing had happened. Only I had no memory of stopping. None. No moment of fatigue. No impulse to pull over. No recollection of cutting the engine or even touching the brakes. It's not unusual for fatigue to blur details, especially after long hauls. But this wasn't that. This was complete absence, a total black slice in time, like someone had lifted the film strip out of my life and smoothed the edges so I couldn't tell it was missing. I stepped out of the cab and looked around. To the left, a barbed wire fence and field. To the right, a thin trail that looked like it hadn't been used in years. I was parked neat and square. No signs of sliding or hard braking, yet I hadn't chosen to stop, and I hadn't chosen to start again either. I figured maybe I'd had a micro nap behind the wheel and instinctively pulled over. Not ideal, but it happens. That's what I told myself as I circled the truck to do a routine walk around. But the frost changed everything. There had been a light coating of ice overnight, enough to leave patterns in the grass and dust. My rear tires were lined with frozen dew, but on the driver's side, the trail was broken by footprints, bare ones. I crouched and looked closer. They weren't boot prints. I wear Red Wings, size 12, thick tread. These were smaller, narrower, no socks, no shoe marks, just the outline of feet, visible toes, arch, heel, as if someone had stepped out of the cab and walked into the field. They trailed out from my truck, 10, maybe 12 feet, then stopped, just stopped. No return prints. No stagger, no drag marks, nothing. The last one was pressed into a soft patch of thawed soil. Beyond that, clean frost. I stood there, not moving, breath fogging in the cold. Then I noticed something else. The driver's door was clean, too clean. I hadn't washed the truck in 2 weeks, but the handle was spotless, smudged like it had been wiped or cleaned or avoided. I walked back to the passenger side, opened the door, and climbed in through that way. I shut the door slowly and sat there staring at the steering wheel. It felt wrong, not violated, not dirty, just unfamiliar, like I was sitting in a replica of my own cab. I checked the dashcam footage. It had power, full battery, but when I opened the folder, the last clip stopped just before the 47-minute window. The next recording started exactly at 4:28 a.m. as the engine turned on again. No gap, no footage, nothing of what had happened during the missing time, just a clean cut. Like the camera had blinked. I reviewed everything again, frame by frame. In the footage after the engine restarted, I saw myself, or at least someone moving like me. Hands on the wheel, eyes forward, no expression, completely still, too still. I don't remember starting the engine. I don't remember seeing the road ahead. But the footage showed someone behind the wheel, someone who never blinked in 5 straight minutes. I talked to a few other drivers at a fueling station near Cheyenne that night, kept it vague, asked if anyone had ever woken up in the wrong place or had weird gaps in memory on the road. One guy, mid-40s, ex-military, said he'd once had a stretch where he drove 88 miles without remembering a single turn. Swore he'd been awake the whole time. Even checked receipts and found them signed in his own handwriting, but the memory, gone. Another mentioned microfugues, a term I'd never heard. Apparently, under extreme fatigue, your brain can dissociate, a split state where the body continues functioning without the conscious mind being fully present. People have been known to cook meals, write paragraphs, or even drive entire routes like that. Thing is, most of those stories have common markers: confusion, slurred memory, anxiety. I didn't feel any of those. What I felt was absence, not confusion, like something else had filled the space I was supposed to be in. And then came the final detail. Later that night, I went to log my hours and opened my paper sleep record, just a habit. I always jot backup notes, old school, in case tech fails. There was a page I didn't recognize, a full page in my handwriting, but the ink was off, lighter, faded, like it had been erased and rewritten. It said, "I watched you sleep. You opened your eyes, but nothing behind them moved. I learned how to steer." I stared at the words for a long time. It wasn't a dream journal. It wasn't a story. It was written in the logbook. Same pen, same notepad. But when I touched the paper, it felt colder than the rest, almost damp. I flipped to the front of the pad and checked something I'd never thought to check before. Fingerprints. Not a single smudge, not mine, not anyone's. The page was clean, too clean, like it had been written without contact. I brought the notebook to a buddy who used to work law enforcement. He scanned it under a UV scope out of curiosity. Nothing. No prints, no skin oils, no transfer, just ink. He asked me if I was messing with him. I wasn't. Weeks passed. No more blackouts, no more missing time. But every so often, I find myself waking up in my cab with the GPS, tracking a perfect straight-line route. Not a single swerve, no braking, no speed shifts, perfect driving, like someone who knew the road better than I do. Someone who wasn't tired. And every time I check my mirror in those moments, I see my own eyes staring back, still, blank. Like they're waiting for me to fall asleep again.